Okay. Well, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Yes, still morning. Glad to have you here. Thank you for coming to my talk today. My name is Christine Assaf, and we're going to talk a little bit about communication and specifically how to communicate better with your employees to get more productivity, efficiency, and just overall better conversations. So first things first, you guys have probably all seen these slides. Make sure your cell phones are silent, please. I will throw things at you if they go off during my speech. They'll be soft things, so not too hard. But also, please make sure that you're enjoying everything that PASS has to offer, local user groups, local SQL Saturdays, as well as all of the virtual groups that are online. I have actually done some webinars with the Career Marathon, and I plan on doing some more. So if you like my session and you like what you hear, I might be doing it again. And then also I have a lot of other series of sessions and different things like that, all surrounded around soft skills training, frontline manager training. That's what I do best. So if you like me, you can hear more of me. All right. This is me. I am a people advisor. That is a new title that they've given me at Waste Management. I really like it because I love to give people advice. So I advise people. That's what I do for a living. But short answer is, and probably what you're very used to hearing, is HR. I am in HR. We're the ugly, bad people of the world, I know. Just to be honest with you, I hate HR people. They're the worst. So I love the fact that now I've transitioned to something called people advisor. So now I can just be like, I'm not HR, I'm a people advisor. But I have over 13 years of experience in human resources. 19 years of experience in business management. I've been in business management and done these kind of things my entire life. My specialty is training and development in frontline managers. That's who I love to work with because my favorite thing to do, my favorite thing about frontline managers is what happens is, you're really good technically, right? Everybody here is a data person. I'm probably the only person who's not a data person in this room. Oh, another non-data person, yay. Let's go out for coffee. But the idea is that what ends up happening is you're really technical, you're very good at what you do, and so then we're like, let's make you a manager. And then we just kind of throw you to the wolves, right? And we're like, all right, now because you're really good at what you do, you should just be able to manage, right? It takes an entirely different set of skills. You've probably never been trained on them. No one's ever sat down with you and had those conversations. And you have to kind of learn as you go, right? And make mistakes and stumble and fall the entire way. And this is unfortunate. And what my passion is to make sure that doesn't happen to you. Because once you become a manager, 50 to 60 to more so of your job becomes managing people, and which means that you're not technical anymore. So it's not just as easy as fixing code, right? We can't do that. Now, how do we fix people, right? All right, that's a very different thing. So this is what I love to do. I do have a bachelor's degree in business management. I am in grad school right now for industrial organizational psychology. And if you don't know what that means, it's basically just how groups of people work together in a business. So I really like it. Got a lot of fun things that I'm learning right now. And if you ever want to go into that field, just know that you're going to read case study after case study after case study after case study until you're blue in the face, until your eyes glaze over. So I will refer to studies. I don't have the links, on the slides or anything like that, but if you want the study to just prove or to read, because you like to do that in your spare time, which is weird, then I will be happy to provide you with any of the research that backs up some of these things. So here's what we're going to talk about today. Oh, my Twitter handle, HRTact. Please feel free to tweet. You can find me on LinkedIn, too. I don't think I have my email address on here, but if you ever want to email me, have any questions or anything specific, it's just my first and last name at gmail.com. Pretty easy to understand. But you can always, slide into my DMs there at HRTact, all right? Okay, so what we're going to learn today, we're going to talk about why feedback is important, because I want to make sure I get your buy-in first on why this is important. I wouldn't think that you would be here unless you felt like it was important, but we're going to make sure we're all on the same page with that. We're also going to talk about positive and negative feedback. Most of the time, whenever we're talking about giving feedback to our employees, the first thing we jump to is, we have to have a tough conversation, and they're not going to like this, and I need to know how to navigate it, right? But we're going to talk about positive, too, because that's something that also is a huge issue, and studies actually show is most important to employees. We're going to talk about the formal methods of feedback, kind of the formal process that we go through on giving feedback, a little bit of HR in there, and then some best practices that I've definitely seen, as well as what studies show that is the best to have. And then we're going to do some practice, because I firmly believe that the best way to get the way to get better at having these conversations is to do them, unfortunately. And I'm going to say something that's about to terrify everybody in the room. If you want to get better at having conversations, if you want to get better at speaking, if you want to present, if you want to do anything, you have to learn how to public speak. right? And I know I just gave terror to everyone in the room, right? All right. But public speaking is the best way for you to get better at how to converse, right? On how to communicate. Because once you have to communicate in a way where everybody's is on you, everybody's in the room, it puts you in that same situation, right? And so what I always say is the limbic system often reacts in the same way that an man-eating tiger is going to get us versus when we are going to have a tough conversation or when we're going to have to public speak or anything like that, right? Everything shuts down, right? All of the blood rushes into our internal organs, our hands get cold, right? Our head gets foggy, our mouth gets dry, right? This is how our limbic system is supposed to react, right? But unfortunately, it reacts in a very inopportune time, right? But if you want to get better at how to think on the fly, there's a great group called Toastmasters, and I'm going to just plug them for a second. Toastmasters, I'm sure there's a million groups here in the Seattle area if you're local. In your own city, I'm sure they're available as well. But they have something called table topics. And table topics is where you have to impromptu, for about a minute or two, be asked a question that you know nothing about, stand up and eloquently speak about it for about 1 to 2 minutes. Right? Sounds terrifying, doesn't it? But the reason for that is that it helps you, right, to be able to think on the fly. It's going to help you in your job because there's going to be a time at some point that you're called to the table and told, hey, can you speak about this for a little bit? And you weren't supposed to be called upon, right? And you didn't know, right? And they just need concise, specific information, right? So that's going to help you with that. But in the same vein, this communication that we're talking about here, being able to think on the fly, being able to have those ability to really be able to understand and say what you want to say and go slowly and really think about your words is very, very important in these conversations. The same thing applies. Putting yourself in that situation where your limbic system reacts to that, right? And you get used to the way that your particular body reacts when you're under stress and pressure is going to help you with these conversations. Am I making sense to everybody in the room? Okay, good. Perfect. All right. So we're going to practice a little bit, and then I think we'll have time for Q&A. So if you have any specific issues or concerns or just any kind of questions that you have, I'll feel free to answer all of those. All right. So let's get started. How many of you like getting positive feedback? You like when your boss tells you something good? Okay, so most people in the room, right? All right, how many people in the room like getting negative feedback when your boss tells you you didn't do something really well? Okay, all right, maybe half and half, right? So for those who raise your hands twice, why? Why do you like getting negative feedback?
Because I've had bosses that gave no negative feedback and you couldn't get it.
So he had a boss that gave no negative feedback, and so you couldn't do what was in?
You didn't get that constructive criticism, you didn't grow,
Didn't grow, because we didn't grow, right? Anybody else? Anybody else agree or disagree with that? Same exact experience, right? Agree over here? Absolutely, right? We like to think that we don't like to get negative feedback, right? That our thought is that most people don't like getting negative feedback. When it really comes down to it, right? We actually do like negative feedback, and we like it for the reasons you just said. I want to know when I did something wrong, right? And if I'm continually doing something wrong, I want somebody to give me that feedback so that I can turn around and have that constructive criticism and then correct my errors, right? And be able to do something right going forward. Most of us feel that way. Now, we don't like the delivery of the negative feedback. That's the issue, right? The delivery sometimes is where we have issues, right? We don't like the way it's given to us, right? And we don't like the feeling at the moment. But later on, when it sets in, right, when it really marinates, then we realize, hey, that was a good thing that happened to me. I can think of multiple times where I sat in a very uncomfortable conversation and had to get negative feedback about myself. And now I look back at it as turning points in my career, right? I'm sure you do too, right? So the idea is that when it comes down to it, feedback is important because it helps us to learn and grow, whether it's positive or negative. We like the accolades, of course, right? But we also like when we're hearing about things that are, that we can use improvement on. However, how many of you have heard of the term employee engagement? Anybody ever heard of that term? It's a buzzword, right? I mean, if you haven't heard of it, then you don't know it. So employee engagement, a simple definition, or the definition that I would give of employee engagement, is really an employee feeling so bought into what we do as an organization, right? So bought into what I sell, right, and what I provide, that they're willing to go the extra mile, right, just because they care, right? We're willing to be able to do that extra effort, that extra work without being asked, right? This is the doing the dishes without being asked, okay? That's what this is, all right? And so we want those engaged employees, right? Because they help our bottom line, right? Because if they're willing to do that extra effort, right, then we're gonna have more productive, more efficient, right? Better bottom line, better return on investment for our employee, right? Because they're always going to be able to try to make more money, right, to try to make something better, make something bigger. So employee engagement equals profit, all right? And multiple studies will show this to you, right? Employee engagement is the thing right now. If you can get your employees bought into what you do and really invested, feeling like they own part of what we provide, then they'll turn a profit. But what we also know through this Gallup poll, and this is from 2015, is that organizations that have more engaged employees also said that they got more feedback, that they had a more open relationship with their manager, that they received more feedback from their manager, that their manager was easily accessible, right? And that they were able to communicate with their manager in a good way, right? In a really productive way. So we know that more feedback equals more engagement, and we know more engagement equals more money. So what I like to tell to you is more feedback equals more money, okay? The more you are able to give good feedback and talk with your employees and interact with them, right, on a daily, weekly, however basis, the more productivity you're going to see, and therefore the more money and the more productivity, that you're going to see in your organization. So that's why feedback is important, right? So it helps us to be aware of when we're doing something right or wrong, right? It's correlated to employee engagement. We know this. We know that it's correlated to employee engagement. All right, studies show that environments that have a culture of reciprocal feedback have more engaged employees. When employees feel like their manager is open and accessible and they're able to give reciprocal feedback, they feel like they're more engaged. It's better business outcomes, and therefore feedback equals more money, okay? So I've got your buy-in now. The idea is more money, okay? This isn't just a touchy-feely thing that you should do as a human, which you should, right? But on top of that, you can make more money, okay, by talking to your employees on a more regular basis, okay? So now I got everybody in the room, all right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about positive feedback first, all right? The first thing that I want to talk about is please, please, please do be very, very careful where you think that if I show appreciation to my employees, they're going to start asking me for more money, all right? I've been in workplaces like this before, right? We pay them to do the work. They don't need thank yous, right? You ever been in a workplace like that before? Did you stay there? Nope. All right? Because here's the thing, all right? And it might have been okay, during the recession, but nowadays, you have your pick of the litter of where you want to go. So if I can go to an employer who's going to thank me as well as pay me, guess where I'm going? And we have to vie for talent, right? We don't want talent to leave us because then we have to retrain them. That costs money. That costs time. It's difficult to fill, right? So if we're trying to retain that talent, thank you is going to be your best way. When we do almost all studies, surveys of various different employment environments, this is the number one thing employees talk about, appreciation. Usually whenever we did one at, I worked at the YMCA for a long time, and we did one at the YMCA for all of our sites. And we had them rank from 1 to 10, various different facets of how they would want to be appreciation. 401k, bonuses, things like that, right? And one of them was appreciation, thank you for my boss. That was the number one, right? We tend to think that the number one on everybody's scale is going to be what? Money, salary, right? But I could walk into the door in an office, right? And you could pay me $1 million an hour, but if I'm working for a jerk boss, I'm not staying, right? I'll go somewhere else. And your employees think the same way too, okay? Yes, sir?
What about employees who literally are, just show me money?
Just show me the money.
I don't care about thank you. You can be as touchy-feely fluffy as you want.
I just need the money. So what I always say is always, 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 number one, step one, pay your employees fairly, period. Because the issue that you have is those who are always asking about money feel like they're not getting enough, feel like they're not being paid fairly. So they're always going to come at you about money. But if they are being paid fairly, right? And when I say fairly, I mean that means you need to do your research, right? You need to see what the going rate is for this particular person with this particular skills from multiple sources, okay? And make sure that you're looking at your competitors, right, who could steal them, and make sure that you're competitive with your salary. My big thing is pay them fairly. Then the rest of it is on me. But if I'm not paying them fairly, I can give them everything in the world. Stock options, benefits, bonuses, right? A car. I could give them all those things. It's not going to make any difference because they're going to look at that number every week when they're getting their paycheck or month or whatever, and they're going to say, I'm not getting paid fairly, period. So always pay them fairly. Now, when you have employees who no matter what, they're going to just always be about the money and they're always going to go to the highest dollar, they're never going to be your engaged employees. So the good news is, don't worry about that employee, right? Focus on the ones that you know you can get through to as your engaged employees, but you're always going to have those ones that walk in at 8, leave at 5. This is a job. I will go to the next one if it's $1 more, right? There will be those, and you'll never get through to them. And to be quite honest with you, that's on them. You know, you can offer all of those different things. Don't give up on them, so to speak, but you're never going to get through to them. So know how to reward your employees, and that's definitely, everybody's different, right? Anybody got multiple kids, more than one, right? You treat your kids differently, right? You act like you don't, but you do, okay? Because they talk differently to you, and some of them are sensitive, some of them are not, right? Some of them react well to authoritarian styles, some of them do not, all right? You have to be a little bit more touchy-feely with them, right? Same kind of thing. And I hate to liken employees to children, but unfortunately, I'm an adult babysitter, y'all. All right, so do not equate appreciation with money. Please, 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 okay? I promise you that if you start appreciating them without the thought process of, well, if I do, they're going to ask for more money, that's not going to fly, right? Your employees are already thinking about money. They're always going to think about money, okay? Appreciating them doesn't remind them that they don't feel like they're being paid unfairly. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Give thank yous frequently as you possibly can. You'll never give them enough. All right? It'll always be the top thing that they say they never receive enough of, right? It will always be. Employees are, because here's the deal. We spend our waking hours at work all the time, where I would rather be at home watching Netflix, all right? So would you, all right? So I need a thank you for being here. I know you pay me. I know I'm giving you my services, and you're giving me money to pay for my housing and my bills and everything like that. We're doing a transaction here. I get that. But at the same time, if you want me to be an engaged employee and push forth and do a little bit more effort, and maybe cancel going to my kids' soccer practice so that I can push out whatever needs to get pushed out this afternoon, well then, I need to thank you, right? That's the minimum we can do. The minimum, okay? So make sure we're doing that. All right? Proactive about it, which what I mean by proactive is you schedule time to do it. You schedule time to do it, right? If you do not currently have in your organization a strategy around employee appreciation, you need to do it, all right? Go find your HR office. I told you they're the worst, okay? I hate them too, all right? But go find them, okay? And sit down and say, what's our employee appreciation strategy? Like, what do we do, you know, throughout the year? Do we give out quarterly awards? Do we, you know, barbecues? Are we having barbecues for everybody, right? Are we buying food for everybody? Pizza on Thursday nights, you know? What are we doing? What are the things that we're doing? Because if we're not doing it proactively, then it's not happening. Because if we think it's just going to happen naturally, no, it's not going to happen naturally. Are you kidding me? You're busy on operations, right? That is your job, right, is to make sure things get done and happen. There's no way you're going to be thinking about this, so you have to put it in your schedule. It has to be part of a plan, okay? Now, this is one of my favorite things that I talk about. It's called the STAR. And no good presentation would be anything without leaving you with an acronym. So here's your acronym for the day. So this is from Development Dimensions International, Ddi, which is I'm a certified trainer in the Ddi models. If anybody ever wants to hire me for that, just a shameless plug. But I love the STAR model. And what I mean by this is that when you are giving positive feedback, we're going to do it in a specific way, right? We're not going to just kind of nonchalantly. Like, what's your name, sir?
Jens.
Oh.
Jens.
Jens. Like with a Z? No. Okay.
J-E-N-S.
J-E-N-S, but the J is, yeah, Jens. Okay, great. Yeah, that's right. Okay, perfect. So, Jens, thank you so much for what you do. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay? Versus, Jens, thank you so much for coming to my presentation today, and thank you for coming to PASS. You don't have to do that, right? That's something that you decided to do for your future learning. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to be here at my session when all these other sessions are going on. And I just wanted to thank you and appreciate you conversing with me and being so open. All right, thank you. Very specific, right? Gave him detailed information, right? Made him feel, right, more engaged into what the thank you that I was giving. I like to call the previous thank you, the first thank you, the flyby. That's the flyby thank you. What that means is you remembered that you had to thank them. Oh, by the way, thank you. Appreciate that, right? Thank you, right? Instead of you made the intentional time to come and to thank them, right? There's a big difference. We can tell sincerity. We know when sincerity is not there, right? The flyby thank you is not sincere, right? Make your thank you sincere, right? And I mean it. Thank you very much. I appreciate all of you coming for my session, right? This is a soft skills training. You can be at the technical ones. Maybe your brain's fried a little bit, and that's why you decided to come to this one. Is that what? I'm seeing some shaking heads. I can understand that. I've heard that this, these pass tends to rattle your brain a little bit. Okay, well, great. So we're going to give specifics. We're going to give the situation, right? You know, what the situation is. I just wanted to thank you so much for the project that you worked on with this group, the task. You handled this, and you did it really, really well. This was the action that you did. This was the things that you did to be able to make that happen. And it resulted in us being able to, get this client or get future business or, really make that client happy. And I really appreciate it, right? That's very specific, okay? So when you're giving feedback, give it like a star, okay? With those specifics. Be creative, all right? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Okay, so interesting. So he said that it makes him uncomfortable that if he gets that specific amount of detail. Does anybody else feel that way? Okay. What would be the reasons why you feel uncomfortable with that specific amount of detail?
I think it's just because then I have to respond with something.
Right. So what I would say is that there are the people who are not comfortable receiving appreciation. Right? A lot of people are not good about, first off, there's a lot of people, usually it's my introverts in the room, which most of you probably are all on the introvert cycle. But most people in tech tend to be, right? But what I would say is that most people don't like when people make a big deal about themselves, right? So it's like, I don't want you to give me that attention, because if you give me that attention, then the spotlight is on me, right? And I don't like the spotlight on me. Is that kind of where you're going at? Yeah, anybody else feel the same way? Okay, yeah, and that can definitely happen. What I would suggest is that if you know employees like that, where they're uncomfortable with being given those thank yous in a public way or in a face-to-face way, then find another way to be able to thank them in a creative way, which is what we're talking about, that doesn't really provide that, right? So if you feel like that thank you doesn't work that way, then that's fine. Now, what I will say is psychology shows us that we're not much different than how you train whales or how you train dogs, right? You know, one of the way they say train whales when they do all the little whaling things, they scratch their tongues. Did y'all know that? They love having their tongues scratched, right? Because they can't feed them fish all the time, otherwise the whales will get really, really fat and then they can't jump, right? So they scratch their tongues, right?
I just reply to that.
Yeah.
An idea would be to show appreciation in writing.
Right, absolutely.
There's no opportunity to respond. I wanted to thank you. Here's something I wrote up for you. Read it.
Absolutely. And we can give it in writing. I mean, again, if we know a particular employee makes them very, very uncomfortable, then that's fine. Now, what I will say is that despite the perceived uncomfortability, that either you might have, and if it's delivered to you, what I would say is that on the bell curve, the majority of employees appreciate it this way. You might have fringes on either side, right? But the majority of your employees are always going to fall in that large range of really liking the specific feedback, right? That way, okay? So 9 times out of 10, it's always going to be true, right? It's always going to be true.
And I think the key is to interview your employees, figure out how they want to be appreciated.
Right, absolutely. Ask. Right. We have to ask. Right, absolutely. We have to ask. How would you like that? Okay, but being creative, right? We don't always have to give money as a show of appreciation. I think that's one of the big things, especially if you're a new manager, right? Or if you're an old school manager, You don't always have to give them money to show appreciation, especially when we have situations where maybe we have budget cuts and things like that. I worked for a place one time where we were in a hiring freeze and a salary freeze. It was right during the recession, and we didn't have any money, and everybody knew it, right? And we were all just working our butts off. Everybody's doing 2, 3 jobs, right? That's where we were at, okay? And the CEO of the company knew it, and he knew that he couldn't, and he knew that the team was overworked. He knew that the team was really trying hard. So what he did is he went to the convenience store, grabbed some paydays and some 1,000 grands, right? He turned on some mariachi music on the loudspeakers in the office, wore a sombrero, and started throwing paydays at everybody in the office, right? And on the back of each one of those paydays was a little note that said, man, I wish I, well, not man, but I wish I could give you this, but I can't right now. But thank you for what you do, right? And let me tell you, years later, I saw those little wrappers hanging up in cubicles, all right? The candy was gone, but the wrapper was still there, right? Okay? They appreciate little things like that. Be creative. It doesn't always have to be money. We don't always have to give bonuses, right? That's not what drives everybody. For me, right, I'm all about career professional development. You send me to something like this and you pay for it, I'm going to be happy with you, right? Don't get me wrong, I like money. I'll take money. Money's great, right? It helps. But I'm all about this, right? And so if you're in a situation where you can't give salary, maybe you can do some T&E and send them to PASS, right? Or send them to a SQL Saturday somewhere else, right? Or any other conferences. What MS Ignite that just happened, right? The Ignite just happened in Florida. Is it in Florida? Yeah. All right? So new trainings, new technologies. You guys love learning new technologies, right? Y'all love learning new technologies. So letting them go and do that. Most of the time, your good employees, the ones that are the go-getters, the ones that are doing a really great job, that's what they want, more than money, right? They want to learn the new stuff. They want to be invested in, okay? So it doesn't always have to be money that you have to thank them with, all right? Okay, and make it a part of your culture, all right? That's why I say a strategic plan for positive feedback. Make it part of the culture that you do at your office. It's something that we do all the time. We show appreciation, okay? All right, so let's talk about the bad stuff. This is the one you guys have been waiting for. All right? First things first, it's always researched. Always researched. You never, ever, ever, ever go into any of these conversations without having gone to the data, without having looked into the emails, without having talked to the witnesses and having those conversations. Because the last thing that you want to have happen to you is when you sit down for that difficult conversation, something gets brought up and it makes you look like a fool, right? You made an assumption about how things went, and then as the conversation is going on, you realize that assumption is not true, right? Or it's changed and it's altered a little bit. So we always look at things. Now, objective things, time cards, time stamps, right? Emails, right? That's the things that we look at, okay? When you talk to witnesses and things like that, you know, it depends on how broad and how big this molehill is, right? We don't want to turn it into a mountain by bringing everybody in the office and chastising them as if they're, you know, where were you on the night of Saturday? You know, right? We don't want to get too heavy and deep, but we always want to make sure that we go and look and see the other side of the story. I tell people all the time that there's this side of the story and then there's that side of the story, and it's usually right here, right? It's somewhere in the middle. It's always somewhere in the middle. It's always a shade of gray every time, okay? But you need to know what that shade of gray is, because in the conversation, they're going to get defensive. They're going to start throwing things out there, and you have to be able to defend, right, your point of view on this feedback. Does that make sense? So make sure you research it. It's always formally given, always formally given. And what I mean by formal is it's in an office, it's at a conference table, it's knee to knee with the door closed, right? We are never giving these as an aside. There's never the flyby. Hey, by the way, you didn't do a very good job on that. I just want to let you know, right? We don't do that. Right? That's not good. We don't do it in a team setting. I know a lot of us do the stand-up meetings and what's the word that I'm looking for? So yeah, the scrum meetings. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. Again, not in tech. The scrum meetings, right? And so I know that sometimes there's that feedback that can be given in that group setting. Be careful there, right? Be very careful there. Some employees can feel like, hey, when I'm throwing something out there, that I think might just be about the project, but maybe we're hitting a little close to about a specific person, and that only that one person. You might think, hey, this is about the whole team and the whole project, but if one person is the only person that you're giving that feedback to, are we really giving feedback about the project, or are we trying to lessen the amount of uncomfortability of having that one-on-one conversation? So instead, we'll just bring it up in a group meeting. I've seen this happen before. It doesn't fly. And then what ends up happening is they come running to HR and say, they're talking about my personal business, my personal employee, like what I do, in front of everybody, right? They just aired all my dirty laundry, right? So be very, very careful when you're doing that. Yes, ma'am?
So I was recently on a team of 6 people, 3 seniors, 3 juniors, and all 3 of our juniors were doing a couple of things, so we did decide to bring it up in the group setting. But 2 of those 3 thought it was personal.
Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't really believe that everybody was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you get that across?
Right. So in that situation, what you end up having to do is that you end up having to, I would always emphasize that we have to think about the conversation ahead of time, right? We have to think about the conversation ahead of time and say, how is each person going to react when we talk about this in the team, right? Because if you knew ahead of time and you kind of get an indication of, hey, these people who are doing it more frequently, maybe we have a pre-conversation with them prior to the team and say, hey, just letting you know, we're going to bring this up. This is something that the whole team needs to know. You do it more frequently than everybody else, but we're going to bring it up in the whole team setting. I just want you to be prepared for that, if you're okay with that, okay? And most of the time, that'll get you ahead of on the back end, because what happens is I feel attacked, right? That's the I feel attacked thing. I feel attacked, you just talked about me, right? Because I'm the one that does it most often. But if we have a pre-meeting ahead of time to say, let's talk to those individual people first, make sure we give them a heads up. Want to make sure you know that. Because then that gives them the opportunity also to say, I would prefer if we didn't bring that up in the meeting, because that does make me a little uncomfortable, right? Then you just talk to each person individually, right? You just alter your style of how you're going to communicate it. It takes more time, and all of this takes more time, by the way. This is going to be the thing that you're going to be thinking in the back of your head that's going to go, I don't have time for this. I hear you. I hear you. But if you want more money, if you want more engaged employees who are going to be more productive, who are going to make you more money, then you need to invest the time, right? And that's what it comes down to it. You're going to have more length of time, more tough conversations. All right? But we always give it formally, always in a closed door setting, always need an E. Okay? So let's talk about the differences of the types of styles of feedback that we give. So anybody, well, you don't have to raise your hand. How about this? If you've ever been to a counselor or a therapist, right? And I've been to a counselor or therapist, okay? There's a lot going on in here. All right, so if you've ever been to a counselor or therapist, right, what is it like? What does a counselor or therapist do when you go to visit one of them? So how do you feel? They ask questions like, how do you feel? What else? Anybody else? They listen, right? They ask you how you feel, they listen. What else do they do? You ever have a counselor repeat back what you're saying? Right? You say something and the counselor goes, so what you're saying is blah, 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 and they get paid hundreds of dollars to just repeat back what you say, right? That's it. And then you think it's mind-blowing. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize I said that, right? Or I didn't realize I thought that way. And it's like, that's what they get paid for. I think they just go to school and they just learn how to repeat back what you say. That's it, right? But and I joke. But I'm sorry if there's any therapists in the room. Okay, but the idea is they listen, right? They ask you how you feel, okay? And they repeat back what you say. Are there times in your management career where you have to be the counselor? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I jokingly tell people all the time, as people advisor, I have a chaise in my office. And I will often bring out my pipe and notebook, right? Because people will come into my office, and what do they want to do? Vent. They want to vent. And what do we want to do when they come in and vent? What was that?
Fix it.
Fix it. We want to fix the problem, right? We want to fix it, right? And I don't know if any of y'all have partners or in marriages or long-term relationships, but does that go well with that? Nope. Right? You come home, you want to vent about the day, and the other person on there is like, well, you should do this, you should do that. And you're like, shut up and just listen to me, right? Shut up and just listen to me. How many times do you think your employee is probably saying the exact same thing? Shut up and just listen to me, right? And that's tough because we're so busy, production is delayed, right? We've got many, many things to do. We've got 5 other meetings that have to happen, and the last thing that I need is Joe walking into my office and wanting an event, right? I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. But all he wants is to be heard and listened to and acknowledged, right? They acknowledge my feelings, okay? There are times in your career where you have to be counselor. It is okay for you to ask, right? To say it. Hey, are you just wanting an event? Right? Are you just, do you need my help, or do you just want an event? I just want to be clear on this so that I can understand, what I can do for you. Because I can be here to help you vet. And it's okay for you to say, you want to vent, and I hear it. I really do. I have got a meeting in 5 minutes, so I don't have the time to devote to you like I really should. So let's pause this for a second. Can we schedule some time where we can sit down and you can talk to me about this, right? Because emotion is running high right now for them, right? When we're venting, right, it's all coming out. My favorite is that I like to say it's like a ball of yarn, right? That's all mixed up, right? And what they need is they need somebody to ravel it, right? To make it into a real ball of yarn, right? It's all knotted, and they just need somebody to unknot it. And all they need to do is they just need to talk about it. And when they talk about it, that ball of yarn gets wrapped up nice and tight, and then it's nice and cohesive, okay? That's what they need. So there's going to be times you're going to have to be the counselor. Know your role at that point. Know when you're at that point, okay? Because otherwise, if you don't acknowledge feelings, they come in and venting, and you're like, I don't need to hear this right now, right? I don't want to talk to you. Do you think they'll ever come to you ever again? No, right? They're not going to come to you. They're going to go vent to somebody else. And they're not going to feel like you're an open, approachable manager who they can sit down and talk to, right? They need that, right? Otherwise, they're going to come to my office and vent to me that you don't listen to them, all right? That's the truth, okay? Now, what does a coach do? Motivate? Come on, guys. It's halftime. We need to make this happen. We can do this, right? We've got some problems going on. I know it. We're down by however many points, sports ball, right? Sports ball points, okay? We're down. We're going to make this happen, I promise, okay? Now, I got some changes I need to make, and got some different positions I need you to fill, right? We've got some strategy that we're going to change up, but I know we can do it, right? Is that a coach? Most coaches? Unless you have a bad coach. And whacks you over the head. Do it again, right? But most coaches are motivational, right? Most coaches are strategic, right? They know their players. They know what they're good at, right? They put them in the right spots, in the right places. You ever had to be coach in your career? It's probably most of the time what you want to be, right? That's what we want to be doing all the time, right? Is motivating, moving people into the right places, making sure that the projects get done that they need to, adjusting as needed, right? So there's times you're going to have to be coach, where you're going to have to motivate your team, where you're going to have to sit down with them and say, let me move you into a different role. Let me get you the training that you need. Let me let you work with this other coach, right, who can help you to get where you need to be, okay? So know your role there, too. Know when you need to put on that coaching hat and be the motivational coach, okay? Now, what does a correctional officer do? What does a correctional officer do? Corrects bad behavior, right? They give you a ticket if you're speeding. They arrest you if you broke the law, right? They know what the law is, right? That's what they do. How many times have you ever had to be the correctional officer, right? Sometimes you are going to have to say, this is something that you did that is unacceptable, and you're not allowed to do it anymore. Or this is something that you didn't do, that you have to do from now on, and if you don't, there's going to be consequences, right? Sometimes we think we need to be the correctional officer when really we need to be the counselor or the coach. And then sometimes we do need to be the correctional officer and lay down the law and say, you broke it. But we end up going into that counselor phase because it's a little bit more warm and comfy, right? And we don't want to be the bad guy, okay? So again, know your role here, right? I think it's kind of like, it's like a floating, bar chart, right? Sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes it's a little bit less, but in any way, in any fashion, you're going to revolve around these, okay? Specifics are always necessary when you're giving negative feedback, always. Now, we talked about the star earlier. Instead, now we're not going to do the star, we're going to do what I like to call the pirate star, the star. Okay? So you're going to give the situation that that employee was involved in. Okay? You were involved in such and such group project. Okay? Then you're going to give the task. Your task was to do such and such. Here's the action that happened, what you did, and the result that occurred because of that. Okay? Here's what happened. Here's the result. And it's usually a bad result, right? Then we're going to say, what you could have done differently is this. Okay? Or we might even ask an open-ended question, which we'll talk about those in a bit. What could you have done differently to make that result be different? Right? And ask them to give us the answer. Okay? So star for specifics. Okay? It's always given timely. You never, ever, ever want to leave an employee in a lurch on negative feedback. The worst possible thing that you can do is sit down with an employee weeks after something happened and say, I'd like to talk to you about this. I'm sorry it's been so delayed. Right? Okay? Or if the employee already knows that something's coming down the pipeline, they already know they made a mistake, but then they never got that formal conversation, ever, you're going to lose that employee. You're going to lose them. Right? All right? I've had this happen before. We had an employee who made a serious accounting error. It was huge. We found out about it. We sat down with the employee, went over the information with them, and then for some reason the manager decided that we don't know what we're going to do, but we'll let you know. Then the employee walked out not knowing how, am I fired? Am I suspended? Am I terminated? Am I continuing employment? Are they demoting me? What's going to happen to me? And then unfortunately, because HR did not know, which by the way, you guys are the worst, you'll never let us know these kind of things, right? Because they never let HR know, okay, what ended up happening is that manager went out on maternity leave. No one knew about this conversation. No one knew it occurred. Yeah. And then that employee, when I was interviewing them for their exit interview, said, well, I'm leaving because I was under so much stress, literally hair was falling out of my head. Because for 4 weeks, I had zero idea as to whether or not I was going to walk in the next day and have a job. Because nobody got back with me, right? Be very, very careful here. You want to be clear, timely, all right? We're going to talk about performance reviews. If you're right now making a list of your employee and the things that you want to go over with them, but you've never talked to them about them before, but you're waiting for that annual review or quarterly review to drop that bomb on them, you're doing it wrong. That's wrong. All of your reviews, when you sit down with those annual reviews or those quarterly reviews, they should never be a surprise. Everything you talk about in them, they should already know. Yep, I know I already do that. Yep, I know that's already a problem. Okay? But that's giving open feedback all the time, reciprocal. Okay? Remember, timely. Give them timely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about formal feedback since we got into it. How many of you have a progressive discipline policy? Anybody got a progressive discipline policy, something that's written in their company? Okay, good. Most of us do. If you do not, you can Google progressive discipline policy and find a whole bunch of different formats that are out there for you to be able to have. I do recommend for everybody to have some kind of discipline policy. Have it published, have it written, have it something, electronic version, whatever you want to have, all right? And let employees have access to it so that they know this is how we handle these kind of things, okay? Typically, they always go with this format, a verbal warning first, then a written, and then usually a suspension or something like that, for if we feel like that's deemed necessary, and then it follows into termination, right? That's usually how these things go. Suspensions, I always say, we use them at Waste Management a lot, but that's mostly because we have a lot of safety incidences. So we will suspend someone pending a safety incident to see whether or not they were at fault or they were not at fault. And that usually works. But I would say that a suspension never motivates an employee, right? You suspend somebody, they're probably going to start looking for another job. If you take a couple of days of my salary and I'm not doing a good job and you suspend me, I'm probably going to leave the company, right? One way or another. Suspensions aren't very good for motivating an employee to come at the level, so use them sparingly, but they can be effective when necessary. Also, use your best judgment on this, okay? All right? If an employee comes in late for their first day ever, I don't think they're going to get terminated for that, right? But if they punch their boss in the face, think they're going to get fired, right? So we're going to use whatever. We're not going to give them a verbal for that one, right? Like we're going to use whatever we deem necessary for that, okay? So use what you feel like is necessary, but definitely have these written. Now, when I say these are written, I mean these are written. They are put on a piece of paper. When you sit down with an employee, they are given over to them, and they have to sign them. Now, verbal warnings don't have to be signed, right? Those are the ones that we call verbal. But when we get into the written, right, we say, hey, we already talked about this. You did it again, right? So now I'm going to have to give you a written warning. You know, HR is making me do it. They're the worst, all right? And so I need you to sign it. But in that written warning, we reference the previous verbal, right? That's how we get it down on paper. Now, why do you think HR are such sticklers about having this? Why do you think that we want this so much? Lawsuits. My job is Chicken Little, the sky is falling. My job is to save you from $100,000 lawsuits that could come your way. My job is to keep you from having to be deposed and talking to a judge. That's all my job is, right? Which kind of stinks, because the thing is that you guys don't even know how much money I've saved you, right? You don't even know, right? Okay? You can't even comprehend it, but I save you all the time, right? But if I'm going in front of a judge as the HR person and I say, well, here's the written warning. It references the verbal. The employee signed it on this day, and we told him it was a final warning. If I've got that, you don't even have to come to the court. I'm good. We're all done. But if you don't got that, I don't have your back. I can't be in your corner if you don't do the little things that are necessary to be done. Yes, sir?
On that note, would you recommend a transcription from verbal discipline session to be signed by both parties?
So verbal warnings I don't think necessarily need to be signed, and here's the reason why. I think that when we're talking about just the psychological progression of getting formal disciplinary feedback, that first indication, that first verbal warning, you want it to be nonchalant but serious. Does that make sense? You want it to be a, hey, we're going to sit down and talk about this knee to knee, right? We're going to talk about this infraction that we have here, right? I'm not going to make you sign anything. It's not going in your personnel file yet, but I want to make sure you understand the severity of this. Please don't do this anymore, or please do this going forward, okay? Whatever the case may be. Thereafter, that's when we come into the written portion of things, right? And we say, hey, we talked about this then. And so if you want to include the transcript or anything like that in the written, yes. Up until that point, we don't put verbals in personnel files, right? I'm sorry, we're right here, and then I'll get you next. Yes, sir.
You said that suspensions generally don't motivate. Do you find that the writtens do? Because generally speaking, almost every organization I've been in, the written is
Right.
just a formality determination.
Right.
The decision
Formal discipline is not a motivator. No, it is not a motivator. You're never going to motivate an employee with formal discipline. Formal discipline is strictly there to protect you and protect the company, as well as to be able to really indicate to the employee of, this is a policy violation. You violated a policy, okay? Now, where I work, again, I have a lot of truck drivers, right, garbage drivers. And so they have to report in at work at 5 a.m., period, right? Because they got to get in their trucks, they have to launch all at the same time, that's what they have to do. And so in my thing, if they don't show up at 5 a.m., if they're late, they're going to get written up, right? They're late because they know when their time is supposed to be. Now, in your setting, right, is very different, right? Flexible workplace settings, we don't have a lot of policy violations that are clear, black and white. But we may have issues and concerns, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. We're going to talk about performance improvement plans, okay? And how those are supposed to be motivators, but they're always done wrong, okay? So we'll talk about that in just a second. Yes, ma'am?
What if they won't sign it?
Yes, so refusal to sign. So one thing I would say about refusal to sign is that the second you have an employee, if you're in that need-to-need conversation, it's just the two of you, and you have a refusal to sign, you can say, hold on for 1 second. What I'm going to go do is I'm going to go get somebody to come in here, right, so that they can be a witness to this, okay? And so then they come sit down, and if they have refusal to sign, you write refuse to sign, and then you sign it, and then that witness signs it. So then that way, when it does go before a judge, and the employee says, I never signed that, I never saw that. They never gave that to me. No. We had this witness. I brought in Christine from HR. She also came in and she signed this. The employee refused to sign. And they absolutely can refuse to sign. That's perfectly fine. A lot of employees feel like that's going to save them, or that like, I just don't agree with this. Now, one thing I will say about the written warnings, make sure you allow for employee comments on your written warnings, okay? A lot of judges do throw out written warnings if there's nothing in there that allows the employee to write their own version of what happened, okay? So make sure you have those. Yes, sir?
So throughout the process, I take my own notes
Uh-huh.
for each conversation I've had,
Mhm.
probably even beyond before formal verbal warnings. How does that apply to lawsuits?
Right, manager's notes. So I do recommend manager's notes. What I would say is they can't go in the employee's personnel file. While they can be admissible in court, it's kind of a pro and a con, right? Because the notes that you take, right, and you could say, I have my manager's notes, I'm going to provide those to court. I've seen them go both ways, right? Because the problem is that if you're not good about your note taking and you're writing down things that are disparaging to either you, the company, or whatever, right, or are untrue, then it's going to be just as bad. The judge is going to go through and say, look at this, and all they have to do is look at one line and say, well, you said this, but that's not true. So how can I believe the rest of this, right? And that's what the other lawyer is going to do. So you have to be very careful with those manager's notes. My thing with manager's notes that I like about it is I like for you to keep your own notes. Yes, keep your own notes. Because when you're on the phone with me and you're like, I want to terminate this employee, right? I need to say, okay, let's go through the history. Talk to me step by step. So you've got dates, times. I talked to him this day. I talked to this day, Christine. I talked to him this day. I've tried. We sat and did a written warning. We sat and did this. Great. Okay. It looks like you've done your due diligence, right? So I like them for that. But I try not to put them admissible into court because the problem is that I don't know what you've written, right? And the employee's not signed off on it. So all it is just your narrative. That's it. And so that can be problematic in some cases. Somebody had a question? Yes, sir.
Should I always be consulting with HR before verbal even, or just
You know, so my big thing that I always say is it depends. First off, it also just depends on your HR department. If you've got a good HR department, good head on their shoulders, they do a good job, then yes, 100%. But if your HR department is crappy, then just start doing stuff here on your own. And unfortunately, we still have some, what I like to call old school HR people who are just not real good with the people side, which is interesting to me, because that's what they're supposed to be dealing with, right, is humans. But what I would say is that if you do, then yeah, absolutely include them. If you're nervous about being able to give your verbals and your writtens and things like that, and you want some of that extra help, or if you just want a witness in the room because you're uncomfortable with what might be happening, we're going to talk about that in a bit too, then yeah, absolutely. I have some managers that are new, and so they do contact me for various things. You know, they'll contact me for, this is a weird situation, what advice can you give me? But then I do have some managers that they're tried and true and trusted. They know my style, I know their style. We've worked together before on these things, so they understand, they know where to go with things. And then also timeliness is a big deal. You know, if I'm in Pass and all of my employees are down in the Gulf Coast right now, which is where I'm from, some of my managers are just handling things on their own right now, right? And so they know to use their best judgment. But so, you know, your mileage may vary in that. Okay. All right. So PIPs, let's talk about those. Anybody ever been on a performance improvement plan? Anybody ever been on one? I've been on one. All right. So here's what I'll tell you about these, okay? The problem with performance improvement plans is that I don't think that they're done very well. All right. They are supposed to be for performance improvement, to improve performance. But what do we use them for? To fire people. We use them to fire people, to force them to leave, right? We say, you know what, we've got somebody who's just not cutting the mustard. They really haven't violated any policies. We really haven't written them up for anything, but they're just not doing a good job. Let's put them on a performance improvement plan. Because the thing is that the second you get on a performance improvement plan, you're completely dejected as an employee, right? And now you don't want to work there anymore. And so you're put on the 30, 60, 90-day performance improvement plan, and then you're like, I'm just going to go look for another job, right? I'm just going to go look for another job. Especially because a lot of times what we do is these performance improvement plans, the goals are so high, right? We set the bar so high that it's impossible for them to reach it. So we know by the end of 90 days, done, right? We're going to fire them, right? We know we're going to. So here's the thing that I'll say about these. One, make sure that they're never longer than 90 days, okay? Most courts are going to throw them out. They're going to say, if you put an employee on anything longer than 90 days, that's impossible. This employee is going to feel like they're constantly under the gun for their entire career. So don't put them on anything longer. Do not do consecutive performance improvement plans, okay? It's not going to happen. A judge is going to tell you that's entirely too long for an employee. You can evaluate them in 30, 60, 90 days. Two, make sure these are things that you can sit down with the employee and reasonably say that you could do them too. Make sure that these goals are reasonable. They need to be reasonable, okay? And if you're gauging these goals based upon your best employee, then they're not reasonable. Remember, everybody's on that bell curve. You're going to have your stallions who are doing a great job, right? But you cannot gauge the rest of your workforce based upon those people, right? You have to gauge them upon what they do, right? I had a teenager once, all right? My kid's in college now, but I had a teenager once, right? And we had a deadline of midnight, right? You have to be home by midnight. This is what most people have, right? And if they walk in at 11:59, right? Wow, cutting it close, huh? Right? Cutting it close, huh? The goal was midnight. They came in a minute ahead of time. They met the goal. But yet I give them this feedback that indicates to them what? You didn't do good enough, right? Well, then why didn't I just make it 11:59? Then when would they have walked in? At 11:58. They're hitting the goal that I'm setting for them. So make sure when you're doing these performance improvement plans that you're not setting something that's above the level that they're able to do, that's unreasonable, right? Give them something that they can do. Now, we always go back to the job description, right? This is what often is said to me in for performance improvement. I have managers come in and they'll say, well, Christine, she just has a bad attitude. Okay, explain to me what bad attitude means, right? How can I put on a performance improvement plan, you need to have a better attitude in 90 days? All right, how am I going to do that? What does it look like? What does good attitude look like? And I'll go through and I'll say, explain to me where in the job description, in each facet of what they do, where bad attitude is in place. Show me where that's happening, okay? Because what I want to see is I want to see measurable things that I can actually look at that are specific, right? And I'm going to go through that line item of job description, line item by line item. Show me what they're not doing. Because the thing is we're not going to put somebody on a performance improvement plan for having a bad attitude. Not happening. Right? We'll put them on a performance improvement plan to say that they need to learn better communication skills, and we're going to give them additional training. We'll say that, hey, you need to be more involved in this. The conversations that you're having with your colleagues are not going well, so we're going to send you to additional training for that, or we're going to work on it. We're going to have weekly meetings where we can talk about what you're going to say before you say it, right? We're going to do those things. Performance improvement plans are for you to do the work. We want to just throw it on the employee and say, now the employee is going to do all this work. Right? And they're going to just do it. Unfortunately, performance improvement plans require you to get involved. You have to. If you want better performance, you can't just throw it on the employee and say, here you go, now do it, right? The reason that they're not getting the best performance that they're getting is because there's some deficiency that we did along the way. We have to look at ourselves a little bit and say there's something that we didn't do with this particular employee, and now they're having performance problems, so we're going to sit down and we're going to give them the additional training, the additional care, the additional concern that they need, and we're going to put them on that plan, all right? Now, we give them the deadlines and the dates and the things like that for the legal reasons, right? Because if in case it doesn't go well, we do have the ability to be able to say, let's just let bygones be bygones. It's not the right fit. You can move on, I'll move on, okay? That's the reason why. Yes, sir?
Back to the job description. What about call it goalpost moving and like redoing job descriptions and whatnot, right? Like they've been there in a role, they've been in that role for a bit, and now there's a brand new set of skills.
Absolutely.
That role requires today. New
Yeah.
job description. But now, like in order to get that promoted, like for anything positive to be evaluated, and performance improvement reasons, but just even general like promotion evaluation stuff. That they're like, well, you moved the goalpost on me. How am I supposed to do that when that's never been in my job?
Right, so that becomes a change management issue, right? If the role has changed and we haven't sat down and conversed about that, or if the goals have changed and we haven't sat down and conversed about that, or if the employee feels like they need additional guidance and additional help and training, right? Now my job was this, now my job is this. It's changed in the past year, and you guys just expect me to just jump in and be able to do it. We have to look at these through an objective lens, right? Now, are there occasions where we just have jerk employees who don't want to do their job? Yes, that is absolutely true. There is occasion that we have jerk employees who don't want to do their jobs, right, and they need to go. But 9 times out of 10, that's not the truth. 9 times out of 10, somewhere along the way, there was something that we did that put that employee on the wrong path, and then we just need to course correct. That's what performance improvement plans should be, is a course correction. Now, if you feel like when you're looking at this employee's entire situation, if you're looking at this and going, I don't know if we should put this employee on a performance improvement plan because I feel like we changed things. We moved the goalpost for this employee, and we just need to be able to sit down with this employee and go, hey, let's talk about some planning for you for the year. We can do that in a performance evaluation, or we can do that just as a side. Hey, we're not putting you on any kind of plan. This isn't anything about your thing. What we're doing is last year we had some issues. You know about them, right? Let's talk about this year, and let's make sure that we get you to the place that you need to be. Thereafter, if they're still not meeting the goals, then we can talk about the next steps, right? But let's first go do the first step, which is to make sure that we did let's go back, retcon that, right? Do you have another question? Yes, sir.
I was just going to comment on that. The prior manager of my department took a data entry person and made them a help desk person. No technology experience whatsoever. When I took over, made clear what the job description was for that role and made sure that that person was willing to accept that these are the expectations at a minimum to be successful in the department. It took probably a year and a half to 2 years of working with the person, trying to get them up to speed. They just never quite made it to the level that was acceptable for our company for the role. We ultimately had to put them on a performance improvement plan. I worked with them every single week along the way, providing status in areas that needed to be improved, monitored it statistically with measurable results. Ultimately, it ended up being their person just couldn't achieve the minimum requirement of the job description they signed, and it was at that point easy to part ways. The employee knew that, I tried.
And that's the best point right there. And that's the best point right there. You want to get to a point with any of your employees where when you're having performance issues, that when you get to the point where you say, hey, it's just not working out. We've both tried really, really hard. And the employee agrees. If you can ever part ways that way, where the employee says, you know what, you did the best that you could do, I did the best that I could do, it's just not the right fit. And they walk away. That's okay. That's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. But if an employee feels like we haven't done our due diligence, that we didn't provide them with what they needed, that we weren't the ones that were out there taking care of them, then that's where we have the issue. Now, we're running real short on time, so I'm going to get through these other last slides real quick. All right, performance reviews, we kind of already talked about this. Any of y'all have annual or quarterly performance reviews? Most of us all do, okay? I hate these. I think they're useless. I think they need to go away. All right, and actually research shows these are useless, okay? They're useless. And here's the reason why. The conversations that you have with your employees on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis are far more important than your annual review. Now, why do employees always ask me about these? When's our annual review? Money. They want to know about raises. And so here's the reason why I hate these. Because what happens is performance reviews have become raise time, right? It's become, this is when I get my raise, right? They don't care about the annual review. All they care about is how much money am I getting, right? That's it. So what I always say is your performance evaluations should be completely separate than your raises. Give your raises completely separate. We're going to get to questions at the end. How about that? Okay? They should be completely separately. And I know for you, you're like, well, wait a second, but how do I do that? Because I ought to be able to say, like, how good are they? And then how much do they deserve based upon how good they are? Okay, well, you know that. You know that before you do the evaluation, right? The problem is what happens is managers go and do the evaluation, and they already know how much money they have to be able to give away. So then what happens to your performance evaluation? You adjust it. It's biased. There are several research studies that show that your performance evaluations, every single one of yours, are completely biased. You could try to be as unbiased as you can possibly be. We can try to get you as close as you can be, but guess what? You have bias in your performance evaluations. Every single one of you, okay? These are horrible. They're terrible because trying to rank somebody, okay, it's never going to happen. We don't work like that. We're nuanced. We're humans, right? You can't just say exceeds expectations, meets expectations, doesn't meet expectations, right? You can't just put people in categories like that, right? Because they have different facets. You know your employees that are really, really good at this, but really, really bad at that, and now you have to decide whether or not they exceed or meet, right? And you have to put them in a forced category, right? It's terrible, okay? I recommend that that if we're going to have evaluations, make them frequent. Quarterly at the minimum, not annually. Do not tie them to your annual rate increases, okay? Right? If you have to pick some specific measurable for what do we give our salary, like how do we decide on salary increases, do it based upon productivity, efficiency, how the company's doing, those kind of things. Base it on that, but don't base it on, how well you do this or how well you do that. Because the problem is they're going to disagree with you, you're going to disagree with them, and there's going to be bias all over that place, right? So that's what I'll say about that. Not a fan of performance reviews. Okay, so let's talk about some best practices. First thing, on these tough conversations, we're always going to prepare. Always, always. Write it down. Jot down some notes, right? Put some bullet points together of what you want to say. Pick 2 or 3 things on topics that you want to cover when you have this difficult conversation with your employee, right? Always prepare. Always write it out, especially if you're the type of person that kind of goes down rabbit holes, right? Or gets distracted, okay? You want to make sure that you've got a concise list of what you're going to do and how it's going to go from A to Z, all right? Know what your end result needs to be, but then also acknowledge the emotions as you're having them, all right? So this is, again, another from DDI, and this is one of my favorite models, and I use this all the time, both in my career as well as in my real life. This will help you in real life, okay? Oh, I got a little laser pointer. I'm going to try not to hit you guys over there in the table. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to open the conversation. We're here to talk about such and such. Okay, I brought you in today because I want to talk about this. Okay, then we're going to clarify. From my understanding, here's what occurred. Okay, and then you give the story, and then you say, would that be accurate? Would that be accurate? Is there anything else that I'm missing out on that? And we clarify to make sure that we understand why we're there, the situations and the tasks that were involved, and everything that occurred as it did. And then we get to the develop stage, right? The develop stage is where we start asking open-ended questions. How do you think you could have done that differently? What are some ideas you have to make that better, right? Open-ended questions. Now, why do we ask open-ended questions? Why don't we just tell them what we want them to do? Absolutely. Do you like being told what to do? No. But you're the manager. You know what's right, right? So the problem is when we talk about fixing problems, we want to tell them what to do. But the problem is that none of us react well being told what to do. We don't like it, right? We like to come to the realization ourselves. Now, our fear is that if we ask an open-ended question like, how do you think you could have handled this differently, that they're going to say some weird answer, or they're not going to get to the answer, or they're going to give something that we don't agree with, right? And so we don't like it. We want to give them our answer because they don't know. Do you really think that's true? Do you think your employees don't know how they could have done something differently when they screw up? Right? Maybe sometimes, right? And maybe we do have to say something like, well, that's a good idea, but let's talk about a couple of other different ideas. I have some, but I'd like to hear yours first, right? Okay? And sometimes you will have the clamming up, right? Remember, the limbic system, right? Man-eating tiger is coming to get them, okay? And so they're going to shut down, right? Fright, flight, fight, or flight. I don't know. Freeze, they're going to freeze, or they're going to fight, or they're going to fly away, right? One of the two. So you're going to have those employees that are going to just go, I don't know, right? I don't know. I don't know. You're the manager, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know. You're the manager. Well, I have some ideas. You're right. I am the manager. I have some ideas, but I'd like to hear yours. Let's have this discussion, right? And if you don't feel like you can have it right now, we can reschedule. But we're going to keep on trying to have this discussion until we can get through it, right? Yeah. So we develop it right now. Once we get to the point where we've asked them that open-ended question, okay, and we get the answer that we want to hear, right? That's when we get to the agree. I call it the hook, right? So how do you think we could have done this differently? Well, maybe I could just make sure that I double-check that stuff before I send it through. Aha, right? So, okay, great. That's a great idea. So do you agree going forward that you're going to double-check that before you send it off? Yeah, I can do that. Great, right? And then we get to the close. So we talked about this. We talked about what the issues were. We talked about the situation. We talked about what you're going to do going forward. We talked about how I'm going to help you going forward with that. Anything else we need to talk about? Anything else we need to bring up? Nope? Good. Great discussion. Glad to hear it. Thank you very much, right? Have a good day. This cycle, it seems forced, but when you learn it, it comes across very well, and you will find your conversation to your interaction to be very much more fruitful, right? By working that way, right? Opening it up to talk about what we're going to talk about. I'm here to bring you here for this. Develop it, or clarify it, then develop it, then agree to it, and then close. Now, what are all these things that are in the middle there? What are those things? Those weird things that we have inside sometimes. Feelings. They're these weird things. We don't know how to describe them, right? We don't know what they are, but we know they exist. Now, here's the one thing that I would love for everybody to leave this room with. You are going to have to talk about feelings in the workplace. Feelings exist in the workplace, and you have to talk about them. Sorry. You want passion. You want innovation. You want dedication, but you don't want frustration. You don't want sadness. You don't want depression. You don't want anger. How's that possible? How is it possible to have some feelings but to not have others? Can't do it, right? If anybody's seen the Pixar movie, right, with the feelings, you gotta have them all. They all are necessary. We want someone to be angry when they feel like things aren't going well and they want to do a better job. Anger is part of motivation, is it not? Right? We get a little angry and that makes us motivated to do better, right? So it's got to exist. The problem that we have is we want to get really objective and say it's not personal, it's business. It's not personal, it's business. It's personal to them. You're sitting in front of them, knee to knee, talking about some really personal stuff, right? There's going to be emotions. They're going to be angry, frustrated, right? They're going to feel that way. Acknowledge it. One of the best life lessons you'll ever learn is how to acknowledge feelings without agreeing or disagreeing with them. Anybody got teenagers? It'll get you through teenager life, okay? Being able to say, I hear you're frustrated right now. I can tell by the sound of your voice and how you're reacting to me. And I just want to let you know that I totally hear that. I can see that with you. I did not acknowledge that I agree or disagree with it. I'm just acknowledging that it exists. It's the gorilla in the room. We're talking about it, okay? When the voices go high or when they shut down, I don't know, you're the manager. I can tell you're really uncomfortable right now. You don't want to talk about this. I get that. It's a difficult conversation. They're not fun for me either, but we got to get through this, okay? And I appreciate you being here for it. Now, I'm appealing to a couple of different things when I do that, right? I'm appealing to their sense of esteem. I know you can get through this, right? You've done this before. I've seen you get through difficult things before. Let's do this together, right? We appeal to that esteem. We appeal to their empathy, right? I know this is difficult. I can understand how you would feel right now, right? Very, very different, all right? We involve them in it when we ask those open-ended questions, right? How do you think you could do this? What are the things that you think you can do? How can I involve you in the solution, right? Okay? And then we also give them the support they need and sharing. Never underestimate the ability to share some vulnerable stories with your employees. Anybody ever read Brené Brown's books? Highly recommend them. The power of vulnerability, right? Being able to say, I've sat in a room like this before and had my manager do the exact same thing to me, and I know how hard this is. I know it. It sucks. I don't like it. I didn't like it when it happened to me, but I'll tell you what, we're going to get through this, me and you together, right? It sounds touchy-feely. I know each of you feel like that's such a touchy-feely thing to do, but I promise you that your employee is going to feel like it's a more productive conversation if they feel like you are interacting with them like an adult and like a human, rather than just telling them what to do, okay? So, highly recommend these. Definitely use it, all right? Now, anybody ever use the Oreo sandwich approach? The Oreo cookie, you know, you say one nice thing, then you say something crappy in the middle, and then you say another nice thing, right? You're really, really good at what you do. We appreciate, you know, you do this great. There's one thing that we have a problem with, and it's this. But you're really, really great at this other stuff. What's the only thing that you heard? I call it the crap sandwich. That's the poo sandwich, right? That's what you just gave me. You just gave me a turd sandwich, and I know what that tastes like, right? You're trying to mask it to make it seem like you're not giving me any bad advice, but you're not. You're giving it to me, and that's all I'm going to walk away with. I'm not going to hear anything that you said that was nice. It's not sincere. It doesn't come across as sincere. Okay? So if that's your methodology of let me say something nice in this, I'd rather you say, if you're going to appeal to my esteem, I'd rather you say, I've seen you get through difficult things, and this is a difficult situation that we have to get through right here, right? I've seen you I've given you feedback before, and you've always responded really well with it, so I know we can respond well with this. Again, acknowledging it, acknowledging the gift in the room, right? I've seen you do these projects before. This one you didn't do too well on, but I've seen you do it before, right? Personal experience like that is going to be good. Now, if you have an employee where you've never seen them ever do anything good, okay, you have a whole different set of problems. But in some kind of way, shape, or form, you are able to acknowledge to them that, hey, you know, I know you're great at what you do. I know you are. Okay, we have some difficult things that we're going to have to talk about, some things that you're not going to like to hear, but I know you're really great at it, right? Don't worry about the Oreo sandwich. It's not going to happen. Okay, they're not going to hear it. Okay, now. SMART goals, y'all know what this means? Specific, measurable, achievable, reasonable, reliable. What's the R? Something like that. And timely, right? Time sensitive, right? Okay? So make sure that when we're talking and we're giving goals, when we get to that agree section and that close section of the circle, that we are giving SMART goals, okay? Broken record technique is my favorite, right? This one is one, oh, we are over time, guys. I'm so sorry. I'll tell you what, broken record technique, that just means repeating the thing over and over again, right? That's what they're going to hear. The more you repeat, the more they're going to walk away with it, right? Over the Oreo sandwich, the thing that we say the most often is what they're going to walk out and hear. I only recommend you give them 2 to 3 things to talk about. If you give any more than that, you've lost them, right? When defensive, drive back to the employee's refraction. They're always going to say something like, well, what about Paul? Well, what about Susie? Well, what about this person? You let them get away with it. We always say, you know, if that's an issue, I'll address it. But we're not here to talk about Joe or Susie right now. We're here to talk about you. So let's get back to that. Okay? Always drive back. Witnesses when possible for formal discipline, especially when it comes to like sexual harassment, anything serious. Always try to get either an HR person or anybody in the room. And then always allow for comments. Now, we were going to practice, but we don't have to do that because we're running late on time, so I apologize for that. But I appreciate everyone being here. Thank you so much. We had a lot of great questions, so I think that's why we kind of ran over time. Does anybody have any additional questions? Anyone? Yes?
So how much do you prepare your employee to prepare for a tough meeting?
So how much do you, the question was, yeah.
Because if they know there's this tough meeting coming up.
I see. So the question is how much do you prepare your employee to prepare for a meeting? Right, so, you know, it's kind of one of those interesting things where it depends on what you're trying to do here. I generally think do not allow an employee to stew on things because the problem is they're going to get in their head and their anxiety is just going to raise through the roof and they're going to just come either prepared for battle or prepared to just cry and melt into a pool and puddle, which ends up happening. Or they might not even show up, right? They're just like, oh, I'm sick that day. Right? Okay. So my recommendation is that I would always have these conversations as something that that are scheduled kind of on the fly. Of hey, come on in my office real quick, or hey, tomorrow morning 9 a.m. come in my office real quick, and give it to them as short as notice as you possibly can. But if it's something where it's more goal setting, or it's something where you guys are investigating things together, or if it's more of a coaching session and less of a actual, you know, disciplinary, anything like that, then I would say, hey, come prepared. We're going to talk about such and such. I want you to bring some of your ideas. I want you to bring some of the things that you want to talk about, things that you have ideas for on how to, you know, work with that. If you have that open relationship already with that employee, then good. So again, use your best judgment there. If you're giving some negative feedback to an employee that they've never heard yet before, then being able to tell them, you know, on Monday, hey, we're having a meeting at 4 p.m. on Friday. That's going to freak them out, right? They're going to think all week they're getting fired on Friday, right? So you got to use your best judgment on that one. Yes, ma'am.
How do you help an employee who's always defensive
About everything? Yeah. So what I would say about that is that again, it's the gorilla in the room, right? So what we need to do is we need to sit down with that employee and we need to say what's the best method for me to be able to communicate with you to really get through? I feel like a lot of times when I talk with you, I feel like I'm getting a lot of defensive back, and I need to know how to talk about that. Now, what I would say is that most of the time when an employee is feeling defensive, it's because they feel like they're not involved. One of my favorite things to do is the employees who are very, very defensive, or the employees who never do anything wrong, is to give them more responsibility and things like that. I know, I hear you, right? Yeah, well, and that's fine. But then what we do is then we sit down with that employee and we tell that employee, I want to be able to give you some more additional things. So I'm going to train with you and I'm going to work with you, right? To really be able to get that. Now, the other thing is that we also need to, and like I say, have the heart-to-heart. Have the heart-to-heart. Sit down and say, I am probably very deficient in the way that I communicate with you. There's something I'm doing that has definitely put you on edge, right? That the second I say it, it's coming back as defensive, right?
What do you think about taking that person out to lunch or away from campus or taking a walk?
I mean, yeah, that's fine. I mean, what I would suggest is that the idea, what you're thinking is okay, if we do it at lunch or if we do it out at a walk, maybe they won't be, maybe that setting that is going to be better. Ask, right? Hey, I want to have a conversation with you. It's about something a little bit, serious, blah, blah, blah. Would you rather we have it in the office? Would you rather we go to lunch? Would you like to take a walk? What would be best, right, for you? So that we can really be able to have this heart-to-heart. And again, the heart-to-heart thing, that's only going to benefit you, because here's the antithesis, right? Here's the opposite of that. We don't have this conversation. We continue to have defensiveness. Yeah. We have this conversation, and there's an opportunity that maybe things go well, and then we don't have defensiveness, right? But if we don't, we're never going to know, right? Now, there's also the opportunity that the defensiveness continues, but at least we've opened the door to be able to have that communication, right? To be able to say, we talked about this like a week or two ago, and I still feel like we're not on the same page, right? So what can I do differently? What is it that you need? How should I communicate with you in a way that I feel like is more productive and that you feel like you're receiving the type of feedback that you need from me, right? Just being very bold about it. Yep. Anybody else? Okay, well, that's it. I'm sorry we weren't able to go through the scenarios, but you guys were great. Thank you for all the questions.